We're going to go over this morning to visit a couple of good old friends of mine, Tom Beck and Kalin Grigg. Kalin is a retired professor of sociology from the local college, Fort Lewis College, where I also used to teach part-time. He and I used to take summer classes of students up to Glacier National Park and teach them about grizzly bears and how people in that area around there have learned to live compatibly with grizzly bears. Tom Beck is a retired wildlife biologist from the Colorado Division of Wildlife, one of the leading black bear experts in the country. And he and his wife Sandy pretty much live almost exclusively on fish they catch, animals they bring in hunting, and gardens that they grow. They're real remarkable people, both of them, and I think they really have some good things to say about humanity's relationship with nature, both good and bad, and how hunting fits into that picture. So how was it getting back with your boys again? You know, you grew up hunting with your dad, and when he was still alive, all four of you got together sometime. That must is kind of a family tradition, hunting. I mean, Hud's an officer in the Marine Corps in California, and James is a wildlife biologist over on the other side of the state. And it seems like one of the times that you're more likely to get together, it's during hunting season. Has that been a pretty special family tradition for you?
Oh yeah, it's huge. Yeah, I was looking the other day on my desk at home. I have a picture. I was just looking at it a couple of days ago. And it's a picture of my brother and I, and my dad, and his older brother, his only older brother, and my grandfather, and several cousins, and we're in the San Luis Valley, and we were rabbit hunting, and it's one of those pictures.
And you were how old at the time?
Well, I was thinking about it in the picture because when I was 5 years old, I fell out of a tree and broke my femur, and I remember I had a limp, pretty bad limp, for about a year recovering from that. And I remember in this rabbit hunt that I still had a little limp. So I would say I was probably 6 years old. And I'm standing there with my little single shot 410 and my bunny in this picture. And it just reminded me of growing up in that kind of tradition. My dad's father and brother were hunters and did a lot of hunting and fishing. And so my dad, you know, even though we grew up north of Denver and in an emerging suburban lifestyle up there, but hunting and fishing was always a huge part. Sit down. A huge part of our lives. And so yeah, whether it was you know, we just spent a great deal of time fishing the high mountain trout streams, and sitting on the banks of rivers in blinds, duck hunting, and or out in some of the fields doing goose hunting, and in fact, I think about it often. I used to talk about this to some of my students when you know, when I was a teenager, like most young people growing up in this culture, and particularly in the 70s, I was a fairly alienated kid, and I don't, you know, I was fairly close to my parents, but I don't know that they knew at times what to do with me. But my dad had the wisdom, I think, to just keep taking me into wild places, and so much of our free time we would spend fly fishing on the streams and rivers and hunting together, and even through those years when we were pretty alienated from each other. You know, we'd oftentimes find ourselves sharing hours on a trout stream or sitting next to each other in a duck or a goose blind.
Something you and I didn't have.
And I remember that.
I'm jealous.
I remember this very profound experience that nurtured in me. That in spite of this sense that everything was all wrong in the world, and with me personally sometimes, in those times and places, everything was all right. It was just that relationship, that experience that we all share, I know something about that became just extremely important in my life as the one experience I think that was strong enough to mediate a lot of the alienating and destructive influences of the culture. And so you know that just became a huge part of my own life, and then raising my two boys, it just from a young age that
I remember seeing, I guess it was Jamin with a little kid, and he's in a camo backpack on your back. And you're out hunting
in archery camp.
Boy, I can't believe how you just nailed my experience too. Only child, and I was always in trouble in the city. I mean, I was in trouble. And
you never grew out of it, did you?
No. No. But and my dad did not. He was a workaholic, but he knew too. And I was 14 years old, and he took, he had one day off, so he took that whole day to drive me to the other part of the state, Oklahoma, where there were a few deer back at that time, and dumped me and a friend off for 5 days and just let us go. No, he knew when I was out in the woods I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Everything was okay.
Yeah.
And I would probably have wound up in prison or some horrible thing if it wasn't for hunting and fishing and Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
I had a really good experience there. And same thing. I mean, I was alienated, and it saved me, and it still does today. When I just get tied in knots, I just go for a long walk in the woods. But the way hunting fits in there for me is I just don't have the motivation to get up early, go out in the cold, sit quietly for long hours, climb mountains. I wish I did, but I don't. Hunting provides that motivation. So it's kind of the gateway into that for me. But it's a source of sanity as well as a source of food.
That's important.
And it's fun.
But David, here we are, three friends in western Colorado, come from very divergent backgrounds. I was raised in North Florida in a rural family situation where basically my dad is what most people would call a poacher. He went out and he killed animals and he killed fish, and he fed our family, he fed his mother, he fed his sisters and their families, and that was the culture of what I grew up in. And you learn real quick how to be lethal. And in fact, I was reading a book on the history of wildlife conservation in the United States, written by W.T. Hornady back in the early part of the 20th century. And one comment in there was, he said, when it comes to lethal impacts on wildlife, there is no human population that can match the resident people of Florida. The backwoods people of Florida have just obliterated their wildlife.
Killing machines.
And so I used to tell people, I said, by nature and by nurture, that's what I was. And then when I decided to be a wildlife biologist, difficult time was telling my father and my friends, I can't hunt with you guys anymore. Because I have to follow the rules now, guys. And, it made me a better hunter growing up that way. I learned a lot of skills.
And kind of ironic, you became a very outspoken conservationist and ethicist, and especially in regards to how wildlife is professionally managed.
But it helped put 2,000 miles between us.
So. There you go. A good place to be from,
right.
As they say.
Yeah, and so moved out here and could do things differently. But everything I did in my work, probably and more so than in my hunting, made me seriously evaluate how we do things. In wildlife biology, the techniques we use, are they appropriate? I mean, is this how we want to interact with wildlife? And then once you start doing that on the work side, it moves very easily into the hunting side. Now, what about the methods that I use for hunting? And what about the times of year we hunt, things like this? Is this really appropriate in today's world? And those are questions we have to ask all the time. And the weakest defense always is, well, we've done it this way for a long time, or it's tradition. Or, hey, the world's different. I mean, my granddad, when he grew up, there weren't airplanes. Things happen. And some people believe we walked on the moon,
Some people think the world isn't flat.
So we've got to, I think, with how we deal with wildlife, both from a work ways or hunting ways, we've got to always be self-critical and always be questioning. I mean, you don't have to put yourself down about it, but you got to say, is this really the right relationship I want with the wild animals? And and I'm lucky here. I've got some property, and we've managed it and taken care of it and rehabilitated it. It's been overgrazed for 100 years, and we've got a lot of wildlife here. For an area that I've got neighbors, and I was just telling you guys, we had a bear walk through the other day, feeding on the apples. And we've seen mountain lions here. We get elk in here in the winter. We have mule deer resident here year-round. Foxes, red fox, gray fox, and it's nice.
It's like an oasis.
It's nice, and we've just made a little hot spot for it. And yes, it causes problems, and that's where a lot of people don't realize it means extra work. If you want blackberry bushes, you got to fence the deer out. If you want young aspen trees, you got to fence the deer out. They can't help it.
No, they're trying to make a living.
And it means extra work, but it's worth having it because it's nice having the animals there all the time.
Well, you hit on something that's kind of central to my life and thinking, and central to this project that we've been working on is like, and I can't help and constantly see hunting as a metaphor for the mother culture. The things that are wrong with it, you can track to the mother culture. The things that are right with it are also things that are right with the mother culture. But you can hunt in a way that, as you've just been talking about, that really binds you closer to nature and makes you feel like a positive working part of it. Or you can hunt in a way using technology, using the wrong attitude that further alienates you from nature. And that's my fear of what's happening today. I mean, well-intended people but just don't really have any mentors anymore or an experience to grow up in semi-wild like all three of us did. They see this junk on TV and it's like they go hunting. I don't think it doesn't bring them any closer to nature at all. It doesn't teach them anything about themselves, about self-restraint. I don't know. I'm worried about it in that regard. There's a lot positive looking toward the future, but a lot to be fearful of, and both in hunters' attitudes as influenced by culture and the industry, and in the way wildlife management kind of caters to that. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Right. The simplest way to look at it is for some reason Americans are just competitive. We're competitive about everything. We have to make a contest out of everything. Well, hunting and fishing shouldn't be a contest. I mean, it's
maybe a contest with yourself to
with
see
yourself.
And if you can do it right.
But as soon as we make it a contest between people, it seems it brings out the worst in it. Fishing tournaments, big buck tournaments, big elk tournaments, the whole trophy listing, I mean, as we've talked before, if you really care about highlighting the animal, then you have all the hunters anonymous. Nobody's identified.
Yeah. Take the names out of the record books,
right.
And then it's okay by me.
And it's like one of the few pictures I've ever had of me with my bow with a buck deer. I sent it to you, and you're like, "That's crazy," because I had my full camouflage mask on. Nobody could tell who it was. It's just a guy there in camo. That's the way it ought to be. But we've let this competitive thing get in here, and I think it's brought out a lot of bad behaviors. Just a lot of bad behaviors, and it rather than highlight the animal, to me it diminishes the animals. This fixation on big racks or big bodies and fish and stuff like this. And yet, really, those big-bodied fish probably should be released because they're the best breeders.
Well, you're the only guy I've known who comes back mad. We were hunting one time over here on hay camp, and it's like, we're out, we come back to camp, meet up in the evening. I said, well, he's hunting on a spring. You see anything? Oh, just a couple of big old 6-point bulls. I wish they'd quit hogging that spring up, He won't shoot. He won't shoot a big bull because he wants it there to be a breeder. I just can't go there. I'm going to shoot whatever elk comes in, and if it's a big one, all the better, But I'm not a trophy hunter, and I agree with you completely on that. But Tom is... He walks the talk. So
it's that we used to talk about this in that social ecology field school that I taught and that you were a part of for years. And I think one of the fundamental questions we have to ask is what is the nature of the culture, and how does it prepare us and inform us to hunt? and you look at our modern technological, competitive, consumptive culture that prepares young people to interact socially and do most of their knowledge acquisition through technology, and prepares them far better to spend a day in a mall than in the woods. I mean, there's no culture there to, like you're saying, to prepare them, to give them sets of values and experiences and perspectives to go into the woods. So you take all of the dysfunctional and really destructive sort of values and perspectives of this culture and put it into a hunting venue, and this kind of stuff that you're talking about is what we get. I mean, sometimes I think that a slingshot is too much weaponry in the hand of a person that is just a product of this culture, because there's so little real preparation compared to the like we talk about it, that field school was looking at models of ways that people live within nature without destroying it, live within nature and subsist on nature and wild resources and wild animals with profound respect, with profound reciprocity, the way Tom and Sandy have developed here in their relationship with this place and these deer. And it's a as you know, it's just such an interesting cross-cultural study. Years ago, I spent a couple of years in southeast Alaska with the Tlingits, and I've had, in courses, I had a number of Tlingit students, native students in courses at Fort Lewis, and I've never told anybody this, and Jen was there, but I don't talk about it just because it's kind of a weird thing, but for me it's just kind of embarrassing. But we were up in southeast Alaska, and the Tlingits adopted me, officially adopted me into the tribe, which was this enormous honor.
They don't do that with every white guy that comes along.
No,
I take it.
and they did it because they felt I had been such a positive influence in so many of their young people's lives that had gone to Fort Lewis. But while we were up there, we spent most of a week in a fish camp, in a Tlingit fish camp, and just fishing with these people and watching them teach their culture to their young people in these fish camps, and the preparation to fish and the ritual. I mean, not over the top kinds of ritual, but simple things they did in the fishing itself, and the respect that they showed. And as they would take salmon from the gill nets, they would thank each fish for giving its life to support them. And there was this tremendous reciprocity. And growing up in that kind of a culture, then you're equipped to enter the woods and to hunt and to fish in responsible ways. Coming from our culture, you have to have some other kinds of experiences, mentors, models, educational opportunities like this film, to give people, to give them a different perspective on what it is that the hunt is about, what it is, how we need to be prepared to go to take a life of an animal, and connect with that experience and connect with that place.
And make it a positive thing for us and the animal and
yes,
nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we should be learning. I mean, I'm
Learning.
61 years old. I'm still learning how to be a good woodsman. And, it's a term that is out of vogue anymore, but it means a person that recognizes wildlife sign when they see it. When you see that rock overturned, you realize a bear did it. Or that stump dug out, that a bear was in there after ants. And when I was just short of retirement, I would be trying to hire or employ seasonal employees out of the wildlife colleges in America. And there weren't any woodsmen. I mean, they knew the theory, they knew the book stuff, but they didn't have the field and professional skills. And it's mostly because they didn't grow up hunting and fishing, because those are skills that you would, if you're going to be a competent hunter and fisherman, you're going to have to develop those skills as you go along. And it really came home to roost about 5 years before I retired. And my agency was issuing personal computers to all the employees, and we were getting minimal training on how to use them, and they were trying to show me how to get on the internet. And I said, I'm really not too interested in figuring out how to get on the internet. And the lady says, well, what if you want to know something about bears? And I said, if I want to know something about bears, I'll go out in the woods and I'll hike for a few days, and I'll think about it, and I'll watch what's going on. I said, that's how I think you need to learn. Is not off of a screen, because there you're just memorizing what somebody else put on there.
And, which is that really
an
great
example of technology inserting a layer of insulation between us and reality.
That's that really great argument that Jack Turner makes in Abstract Wild, that our diminished personal experience of nature and what we know of nature comes through us through these abstracted technological means and just diminishes us as human beings, if that's our experience, right? And the market, the market economy like this, our food, all of those. Our food alone comes through this abstracted market, and I talk to students about this all the time. As long as Red Lobster's serving lobster, we have no idea what the resource base is. We think there's lobster in the world. We made that mistake with cod. We thought, well, as long as as long as the restaurants and the markets have cod available, the cod population must be fine. We're just so abstracted from the resource base itself, as opposed to this kind of experience where you have a pretty good idea of what the deer are doing, how they're migrating, or growing your own food, where you're caring for your own soil base.
And well-managed hunting is a totally sustainable economy.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
And it
Don't forget that.
And it requires habitat. So those of us who this is more than something we do to kill a couple of weekends before football season kicks in. This is a big part of our life. That's we kind of say, well, I want to keep hunting. Those animals have to have a place to live. Let's try to take care of this incredible blessing of public land we've got. In Europe, for all its great cultural heritage, it's been a long time since there's been anything approaching democratic hunting there. It's just an elite thing, and there are forces in our culture and our government now that would like to make that happen here. So I think hunters, it's one of these self-serving altruism, you might say, and it's not really that cut and dried, because I think at least nobody here is just like, well, I only am a conservationist because I want to hunt. But we get the big picture. But it does motivate people who wouldn't get involved in trying to protect roadless areas and public land and stuff. They see what's happening, and maybe they've been coming here for generations as families, and it's like, man, it wasn't like this when Grandpa came. There weren't all these gas and oil roads. It wasn't this overgrazed, although back then it was probably more overgrazed. There weren't ATVs running around everywhere, and it makes you want to do something. If you, somebody said, Abby said, but he borrowed a lot of things from other people, if you don't stand for something, you don't stand for anything. You stand for nothing. So it definitely brought me into this world of woodsmanship and wanting to know how things work and wanting to protect them. If I hadn't been a hunter, I probably wouldn't be here today talking about these things. In fact, I probably wouldn't be here today at all. I'm not kidding. It's been the saving grace in my life.
This last week that my sons were here, they both told me several times that I think it's partially they're getting to the age that they're watching us grow older, and
the youngest one just turned 30.
Yeah, and they know we're not going to be able to do this, forever together. But they both told me, and several different occasions while they were out here, that they said these are the most special experiences that we have. I'm growing up. These are the things that bonded us to to the world that we live in, that made us were hugely influential in who we are as young men, and they said that we look forward to this time being out here hunting with you and chasing the wild wapiti more than anything else in the year. This is what we love to do and what we look forward to.
In America anymore, you got to be mechanized, and
can't hunt elk without an ATV.
And we're sitting, staggering, crippled up, living proof that you can still pack these big animals off. You just have to have the skills and to disassemble the animal on the site, take care of the meat properly, and put it in a pack and come down. So we laughingly refer to ourselves as the old Grey Mules.
There you go.
And we're still getting up and down the hills
Old
doing it that way.
Old Sioux saying, the more you know, the less you need to carry.
That's right.
In the way of gear and equipment. I don't know about, I'm sure it's got to be, grouse hunting is, geez. And I can't keep up with this guy. Can you keep up with him? Man, he just moves out.
Hiking food.
Yeah, but I don't think, I'm 66, I'm the elder here. I don't think and I suspect it's similar for you, I wouldn't be doing this stuff today if I hadn't always done it.
Oh yeah.
If I'd have grown up riding around on a little motorized vehicle and walking as little as possible and not doing this boots on the ground, I wouldn't be doing it today. There's no doubt about it. So hunting saved my life in so many ways. It's I'm eating good, healthy diet. At least we won't talk about the ice cream addiction. And I'm getting huge amounts of exercise. I find ways to expand the 1 month hunting season. Like Tom has been a good influence there. I find other things to hunt in other places, and I just keep at it. And yeah, it hurts more, but you kind of learn to embrace your pain.
The best thing I ever heard this man say was, we were packing out elk one day with one of mine, and he said, "Boy, the only thing I like better than elk hunting is packing out elk." I said, "This is just the kind of friend I need."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and his number 2 son.
And my number 2
could
son.
pack
That's
half
right.
an elk on
His number
one
2
trip.
son, yeah. and HUD's packed out a lot for me through the years, and it's all been appreciated and shared. And
Yeah,
that's the other part of it. Is
yeah, and just like Kalin didn't get an elk this year, I got a hunch he's going to get some elk meat if he wants it somewhere from a friend. I've got a similar network. Goes around, comes around. It's shared. And I also like sharing it with non-hunting friends. Either they just don't choose to hunt, or they can't hunt for one reason or another. Some of them are women and don't choose to hunt. But they really appreciate it. And I think it's real good public relations, too. We're not bad people. Hunting hasn't made us bloodthirsty. It's just the opposite. You're an anti-war peace activist. We're all decent people. It's not a bad influence. Again, if you do it in a way that bonds you closer to nature. But gee, it seems like the way the hunting's going today, the industry is, use this, use that, shoot them from 1,000 yards, new weaponry, don't do any work, you don't have to learn anything, just buy stuff. And then wildlife management seems to be in a lot of states sort of catering to that. It's definitely quantity over quality. I don't know what to think about the future of hunting and the increased urbanization and loss of habitat. There's a lot to think about there. I think it's worth maintaining, but I'm not sure how to go about doing it.
It's really hard to break because we have agencies in every state, plus we also have federal agencies that are responsible for wildlife management. And I think in the last 30 years they've gotten way off track. Philosophically, they're kind of stuck in the 1940s, where in America at that time we had overhunted, we had done terrible things to the habitat, and yet the answers to bring wildlife back were pretty simple, in terms of laws and law enforcement and things like that. And then we kind of got stuck there. And now we're moved along, and it's just like the current wildlife profession uses hunting. They say we need hunting, because we can't manage wildlife in America without hunting. Well, nonsense. Of course we could. And hunting doesn't need, the hunting as an activity does not need this kind of a defense. Like the only reason we hunt is because we need to manage wildlife. No, that's not it at all. The reason you manage wildlife is because there are both positive and negative interactions between wildlife and the humans that live on this continent. And that's what you're trying to manage, both the pluses and the minuses. You know, too many animals in one place, you need to get rid of. And we've always just used hunting as the easy way to do it. And it's not a very good tool. It's kind of like a big old crescent wrench, you know, in your toolbox. You use that thing for 40 chores, none of which it's very good at.
It's a generalist instead of a specialist.
It's better than having 40 separate tools that are good for all these different things. And that's kind of how we've done with hunting. And to me, that's bad, because it makes this dependency between the industry and the agencies and the outspoken hunters that just want, you know, kill as many animals as they can, whatever means, and they always come back and say, well, we need to do this, because if we don't do this, we can't manage wildlife. Well, in fact, we could manage it, but why should we? You know, I mean, hunting should be the end in itself. The hunting activity should be your product. Instead of saying we produced 80,000 elk last year, let's say that we produced 220,000 happy elk hunters. Or
X number of great hunting days.
You know, it's just like with the golf course, you know. They would say we had 200,000 golfers come through last year, and they were all happy, you know. And that's the way hunting needs to be looked at, rather than this body count, this quasi-agricultural, we produce
harvest.
This and match, and we harvest.
Yeah, as if it's a turnip. Me too.
For 30 years in the profession, I wouldn't use that word. It's just, I mean, we kill them. Let's be honest about it. But we do it respectfully, and we make darn good sure that the products are used and cared for in a way. And we should defend, I think, as agencies and as hunters, the activity, because it's a reasonable activity when done right. You know, and most people believe that. Not everybody, but then I don't agree with activity some other people do. You know, and.
Like golf courses. Yeah, you can get rid of all of them as far as I'm concerned.
Certainly, but we all have different things we want to do. And that's what the whole thing about civilization gets complex. You know, because we all have to give and take a little bit. But I think we would be better wildlife managers if we quit saying, you know, that we need to hunt. We need to hunt bears, or we need to hunt elk, because otherwise we can't manage them. I think that's a crutch that we've been using as a profession for a long, long time. And until we get over that hump, until we change philosophically, do we say we're managing wildlife for the citizens of Colorado, which is what our legal statutory direction is, that we're managing it for all the citizens and visitors of Colorado in a lot of ways. And that's sightseeing, that's photography, that's hunting, that's fishing, it's the whole mix. And we've got to get away from this where we have to defend hunting. You know, I don't think we need defending if we behave properly, because we're the ones that let people see behavior. And if we weren't behaving inappropriately, then they wouldn't see bad behavior, would they?
Yeah, like one of your famous to me quotes was, you know, anti-hunters may shine a negative light on hunting, but we're the ones that are powering that light by our behavior. Mm-hmm. If we had flawless behavior, they would have no argument. So we have to look within. And
the other linkage that will change it. I mean, I tried within, and other people have, to change the philosophy of this profession and this activity that's so linked with it, which is hunting, without a whole lot of success. A major failure. But I think what will change it, and it will happen in the next 2 decades, is money. It's the same world over. Money drives. And these agencies have been spoiled because they've been able to basically fund their operation from the sale of hunting licenses, mm-hmm. primarily.
Especially elk.
And especially in this state, elk. And that's changing. And part of it's changing because of the changing demographics of America and the changing culture of America. You know, I mean, if you look at who's hunting today, elk in Colorado, you're going to see a bunch of graybeards. Most of the elk hunters right now are in this block between about 55 and 65 years old. And as we move over, the culture of the young people today, everybody talks about hunter recruitment. Well, they've got a jillion other things going on in their life. and hunting may or may not be a part of it. And these agencies are all going to come up against this financial reality, which is that you can't keep operating just by selling hunting license. You're going to have to get money from the general population. And one thing, when you take money from the general population, they want something for it. And they're going to say, you have to quit catering to just the hunters. You know, you've got to give us something too. And it shouldn't be a zero-sum game where everybody, you know, anything you get means I had to lose something. It doesn't have to be that way. And it's so frustrating to see these hunter organizations constantly wanting to draw a line in the sand. You can't give an inch, even though, you know, you know what you're doing probably isn't that good of an activity, but we can't give an inch, you know.
Bunker mentality.
I don't know that it's ever worked very well in wars. I don't think it's going to work at this one either. No. But the money will change things. The money will definitely will change how we have to start looking at wildlife management in America, because it's not cheap, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. Hopefully somebody will step up and say we want to pay. And we got a lot of examples of that happening. I mean, we have examples of a number of states that have passed, you know, the voters passed tax increases to tax the general population, support wildlife, because by and large Americans have a real positive feel toward wildlife. Maybe it's because we're a fairly young country compared to, you know, other cultures, and we didn't exhaust our wilderness until fairly recently. And
we're working on it.
We're working on it, but so I think that people, even though maybe they're raised in the city and they don't have the same kind of interaction with wildlife that I do, they have these thoughts, or they've read books, and they've, you know, it's a part of of relatively recent American history, and so they have very positive attitudes toward wildlife. You know, we used to sample as an agency the public, and we found out that our agency had phenomenal public support. And then you'd ask the public, what does this agency do? And nobody knew.
It has wildlife in the name.
I thought, man, what an envious position. They think we're great, and they don't even know what we're doing. You know, so, but that's also a great responsibility. We don't want to disappoint them. We don't want to fail them as agency employees. And I think as hunters, we don't want to. You know, I've got more neighbors that don't hunt than hunt. You know, and but I don't have any anti-hunter neighbors. I mean, they're rural people. They understand that it has to go on.
You know, I've never had an anti-hunter mess up a hunt for me in my life, but I've sure had a lot messed up by other hunters.
Yeah. And part of that is, again, the pace of, you know, life. We're kind of a little bit spoiled because we've made a commitment in our life to block out these big blocks of time to spend in the woods and doing these things. But, you know, if you're a guy that you work in Denver, you know, and fight that traffic and all that nonsense, and you drive out of there and you drive half the night of Friday, and you've got Saturday and Sunday morning to hunt, and that's your only time to hunt, you get a little selfish, and sometimes you get a little rude, and you lose track of why you really should have been out there. And I think it's not a behavior we want, but I think it's just a behavior that's going to happen because of the pace of the life we live in kind of the shifting demographics to more and more of an urban society. I mean, if I had to deal with Denver's traffic for 5 days a week, I'd be a crazy man too.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that, just thinking about what you're talking, Tom, one of the things that makes me hopeful about hunting and the future of hunting is this whole, particularly among young people, you know, I've seen it grow over the last 5 or 10 years that I taught. And this local vor movement is real it's very real in their lives.
Like, I mean, try to eat as much as you can that's locally produced, cut down on the waste of transportation costs. And
knowing increasingly where your food comes from, knowing even if you don't have the skills, or you don't have the resources or the property or access to somewhere where you can begin to grow your own food, increasingly having access to real viable, productive farmers markets, and 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 there's increasing interest among young people that I have worked with in that as a real possibility, and that becoming part of their lifestyle, so that it is possible to know where our food comes from. Again, even if you're not securing it yourselves, if you're not hunting or fishing for it, you're going to markets where you have local growers, or if I want to make the effort, I can go out to the farms and see where the food is grown. I can go to the ranches and see where that beef was raised, and in that context, when you and we know this from our own experience with this course and work with young people and having them out here at Tom's Place, if you introduce hunting in that context and begin to talk about hunting where they begin to view it, most of them for the first time, not as sport, not as recreation, but as responsible subsistence and as a responsible life lived within natural ecosystems and resources. It's very reasonable. It makes as much sense to them as growing an organic garden. I think within that sort of subtle paradigm shift in their thinking and their viewing of the world, I think there's a place there for hunting to find a renewed place of importance in their lives. I mean, lots of students that I've worked with over the years, we've introduced to hunting. It doesn't mean that they're all out there hunting, but some of them have. We have a student that for 2 years now has been following me through the woods. I mean, he had never hunted, and we've taught him everything that he knows about hunting at this point. And it was the same way. He just within the context of this kind of discussion about trying to move a little along that continuum away from this extreme on one end of being a consumer to being a producer of what I consume. Hunting, growing food, all of that begins to make sense to them. And we've fed fish that we've caught and elk that we've hunted to those field school classes and classes that I've had at Fort Lewis for 10 or 15 years. And unless somebody is a strict vegetarian, which I respect, everybody that's ever tasted that food would just said, "This is fantastic. I wish I knew how to do this. I wish there was an opportunity for me to eat like this, to grow my own food, to fish and hunt for my own food." And I think there's a tremendous interest out there within that context. They hate what we hate about sport hunting, about
which unfortunately is about all the public is exposed to.
Well, that's it.
Guys like us, we're hiding under rocks. We're not on TV every day.
No. But when they're exposed to it, they very quickly find an affinity to what it is that we're doing. Just like those students Tom was talking about, that when we brought them out here, and he explained this relationship that he has with the deer here, and he said, I basically cultivate, and we've cared for this place, and we've enhanced it and made it something really special in terms of deer habitat.
Not by planting bait crops that deer want, but just by making a healthy
caring
habitat.
For the habitat.
Yeah.
And so when I take a deer or two a year, there's this reciprocal relationship there, and I wondered how some of those students were taking, because a lot of those students come from environmental studies, and a lot of them can be fairly tree huggerish, and to the person, every one of them said that made perfect sense. I've never thought of it that way, and I just think the more we can do what you're doing, what you and Chris are doing with this project, I think there's tremendous opening among young people to think about hunting in the same way that they're thinking about trying to live responsibly in the world that they live in.
I agree, absolutely.
See, the agencies have spent, I don't know, a small fortune through hunter safety courses, trying to teach young people how to be better hunters. and are safer hunters, but not necessarily better hunters. And yet they spend no time whatsoever in how to care for the animals, the meat. And
They don't?
No significant amount of time. Occasional hunter, safety guy will mention, here's what you need to do. But there's so many myths, it's like, well, you need to hang the meat. Well, you hang the meat on a 50-degree day, and I'll guarantee you what's going to grow on it. It's called bacteria.
Yeah.
And it's going to sour that meat.
Life begins at 40.
And a lot of that kind of stuff needs to be part. We've always assumed that you would learn that from your parents, the mentoring process.
Or from your tribe or what.
Yeah. And most people don't realize that at the end of or the beginning of World War II, over 50% of Americans lived on a farm. That's a relatively rapid transition to now almost 2% or less live on a farm. And so a bunch of those type of skills were lost along the way. And I think we as hunters and we as agency professionals owe it that needs to be part of the curriculum and the process of when a person wants to become a hunter as a young person, is to not only teach them how to handle weapons safely, but how to behave appropriately in the woods and how to respect the animal and take care of the meat. And especially take care of meat, because if you've had spoiled meat, you don't want to eat it again. And you really don't. And there's no reason to have spoiled meat. It's fairly easy to take care of.
Yeah, it's a tragedy that happens to one degree or another to all hunters sooner or later, but you lose an animal and you don't recover it. It's a wasted animal. And, my approach to that is I just tear my tag up and say, I've killed an animal, I'm done hunting. But that is something that can happen no matter how hard we try not to let it. It's rare, and it's getting rare. And I've really focused my bow hunting on making that history. But to go out and kill an animal and not be prepared to take care of it, I think is a sin. One is a tragedy, the other is a sin of lack of preparation. That's a wasted animal, that's dishonoring that animal, and you're not getting anything out of it either. And it's, as you say, it's easy, but I will say the Division of Wildlife here in I know you don't have a computer, so you're in the Neanderthal age that way, but they've got all kinds of videos up on how to field dress an elk and that kind of stuff. So they are trying, but I agree.
But again, they're trying to teach you through a TV screen.
Yeah.
You need to get out there and get your hands in it.
But don't you think that would help a guy maybe? I remember my first elk. I didn't have a clue. I'd done deer, but I was way back in, and I had 4 knives, and I dulled all 4 of them so badly that I was down to my Swiss Army knife. I finally got it taken apart, and getting it out was a debacle too. But yeah, guys our age, it's kind of our duty to be mentors to some extent, and I think we all do, either in a public way or also in a private way.
But I've watched with what we call trophy hunting, and what we don't like, which is
porn, head hunting.
The primary motivation to go out there is to shoot a big racked animal so that you can brag to your peers or to other people. They have lost the linkage with hunting to food. Now it's something that's totally separated from food. It's I'm seeking pure approval or ego stroking or whatever it is with this whole idea. And I think that the more that is promoted, the worse it is for hunting. And you need to get back to the fact that people grow gardens and enjoy the act of gardening, but they also do it primarily because they want the food out of that vegetable garden. And I view hunting in a lot of the same way. I enjoy very much the act of hunting, But if I wasn't going to eat that, I don't think I'd go hunting.
No, I won't kill anything that I don't want to eat.
I mean,
that's one of the.
There's other things I could be doing, and I think we've let that slip in the last 25 years in this country. And I think we need to get back to it.
And surveys show that among the non-hunting public that they really readily accept it when it's done for food, and they readily reject it when it's done for trophies. And trophies is another word for ego. we're all three bow hunters, not exclusively. You know, I mean, as I just proved as recently as yesterday, bow's not a real effective weapon to hunt grouse with. You want a shotgun, and there's other times for other things. But our passion, and one of the things, at least, you know, that originally got us together when Melt was operating, was our love for bow hunting. I know what it means to me, but do you guys? Is it just another season, or is there something special and different about bow hunting compared to, say, hunting with a rifle?
You know, I hunt. I both hunt with a bow and with a rifle. Last year I killed my elk with a bow, and the year before that with my rifle. And I think what has always been particularly special about bow hunting for me is that it requires, and I don't know that I'm not even suggesting it requires that it's skill based as much as it just requires an approach and a patience that in order to get close enough to shoot an elk with a bow, you have to you have to become a part of that natural ecosystem in a way you don't with a rifle. I mean, you actually have to go into a particular context and largely be invisible to it, so that what you see and what you hear and what you experience is so enhanced and amplified compared to a rifle hunt. Because I can hike through the woods rifle hunting just like I do if I'm just taking a hike, and I can miss a lot of the subtleties of what it is that is going on around me, not just in terms of the game, but in terms of all of the flora and fauna and wildlife. Because I can spook a group of elk and still get a shot, you know, perhaps 100, 150 or 200 yards away or something like that. Not so as you know, when you're bow hunting, you know, I've never taken a shot over probably 25 yards, and that requires a different way of being in nature, and I've just always, like you, it's just always been so rich to sit there and, you know, Tom and I were talking yesterday, have a red squirrel run across your lap because you're holding so still, and to watch, you know, a bear come into a lick. Or a couple of years ago, in the spring we were hunting, I had a young mountain lion come in. Wow. And I was sitting there above the spring hunting, and he came around, and he was probably 50, 60 yards from me, and he sat on the upper side of the spring, and the two of us just hunted together for probably 30, 45 minutes. And at first I thought, what is he doing? And then I said, he's doing the same thing I am. He's just sitting on this spring hunting. And you would never have that kind of experience rifle hunting. You have to, and so
it's more intimate.
Yeah, that's it. That's the word. It is profoundly intimate in terms of the experiences with the animals, with that setting. So, and I'm honestly, I'm much less successful most of the time bow hunting, but I trade that experience for the lack of success, and I trust my better hunting friends to share their meat with me.
You know, and I started bow hunting in 1974, and I've been off and on bow hunting all the time, but I've also hunted extensively with a rifle, and everything you guys have said is true. But the other thing for me, the big driver, is in the whole course of the year, there is no time better than the month of September in the mountains of southwest Colorado.
Yeah.
It should be half of every year.
It is such a special time. The nights are getting cool again. plants are going dormant. The colors are changing. The elk are coming into their peak of their breeding and are very vocal. It's a transition time that is just beautiful, and it forces me to go to the mountains. And if I've got a bow license, then it's like, yeah, I don't care what's going on down there. I'm heading to the mountains. And that is a very, very big part of the appeal for bow hunting in this state for me. Is it forces me to, or gives me the opportunity now, but to be in the mountains at a time when it is the most beautiful month of the year, you know. And I'm not a winter sports advocate. So.
Winter sports is sitting inside with a glass of wine, reading a good book. That's my idea of winter sports.
Well, a lot of years of snowshoeing in the bear dens kind of took the edge off winter sports for me.
Yeah.
But and the other thing, I think a lot of guys got into bow hunting, and it's partly the reason I did too, is to escape the masses, the sheer numbers. If I could rifle hunt with the same density of hunters, you know, I would enjoy it a whole lot more. But there's something about hunting to me that the more people I see when I'm out there, my enjoyment factor goes down, ratchets down pretty rapidly. And
I just wouldn't hunt if I had to hunt in crowded areas. I just wouldn't do it. And it's not why I'm out there.
And yet we're in a crowded world, and so there's all these trade-offs to be made. And I think a lot of bow hunters go into that simply to avoid the crowds.
Purely utilitarian. The weather's nicer.
You know, and
long season.
That also tells you that it's not essential for most people in terms of their annual larder filling their freezer. They're picking the time of the year that they enjoy being there the most, and when they have all the other factors like low hunter density are in their favor. And so it really shows that activity is a multiple number of factors that go into why you pick it. That was certainly the way with me.
I just